So week to week, we start the show with information about money. The reason is that if you don't have money in your pocket, you're really interested in making a living. You don't really have time to think about how to spend it for the holidays or any other time. And we're very fortunate here because Darren Farwell of Scotia Wealth Management gives us advice. And last week he explained how Trump's election and unexpected results gave us a lesson for investors. He basically said, don't try to time the market or anticipate it. Be a long-term investor. And he gave us examples of that. And because he gives us those examples and because he's honest in his appraisal of what's going on in the world, I love having him here because more often than not, he makes my jaw drop at what I don't know about fashion. In fact, he coined the phrase here, you don't know what you don't know, and it's become something of a modus vivendi for the whole team. So I don't know what I don't know this morning, Darren. What do you have for us?
Well, I'm pretty sure you're not going to know what I'm talking about today because I was a little surprised to find out about it. But I can't go on without talking a little bit about sports because for those who did go to the Grey Cup, it was an absolutely fabulous event. The pregame show was wonderful, the halftime show was wonderful, and it was an exciting nail-biter game right to the end. And, of course, our TFC had the Night of the Red Rain, which was very exciting, and will be having a championship in Toronto. So it was a great week for Toronto sports. Now, as you said, Marilyn, we're moving quickly into December, the holiday season. Of course, that time of year where there's a lot of joy and family and general abundance. But let's face it, not for everyone. I met with a woman about 3 weeks ago. She's going through a difficult divorce, and of course, this is a very difficult time of year for someone to be going through something as emotional as that. Now, she was referred to me because, well, I do, in fact, deal with a good number of single women in that situation who have sort of on their own as a result of either death of a spouse or divorce. In fact, I have my certified divorce financial analyst designation. But what brought this woman to mind for today's show was that I was asked this week to do an interview on BNN in regard to divorce. BNN was looking for some comments on Divorce Day. Had you ever heard of Divorce Day, Marilyn?
No. Now I'm going to learn something new.
Well, Divorce Day, I hadn't heard of it. That's why I was a little surprised. Divorce Day comes from the phrase was coined in the UK, and it's based on the fact that to their surprise, they found that family lawyers' calls to a family lawyer spiked 20 to 30% the Monday after New Year's. Now, it's a real phenomenon, and while we don't have quite the same numbers in Canada, there's a noticeable difference the week right after the New Year's. So what I see in the story of Karen, the woman go through the early stages of her divorce, and many like her, is it the stress and tensions of going through divorce which often reflect the stress and tensions of the marriage? Well, for some ways, they really are, and for her, it's a happy story. It's a very happy story. She has an opportunity to redefine her life and empower herself, and Karen is very happy about. But there's also sadness. There's sadness because, well, in a sense, marriage lost there's some mourning involved. So Karen is reviewing a couple of settlement options she's been presented. She's asked me to look at those options and evaluate them for her to decide which of the options would be better. And my certified divorce financial analyst designation makes me uniquely positioned to do that. She also asked for any tips I had for her, given that I deal with many others in her situation. And this is what I spoke about on BNN, and there's a blog on that as well. And so I'm going to give today 5 tips to help manage the process of divorce. The first one, financial awareness. Now, financial awareness, of course, should be something that has nothing to do with divorce. It should be part of, regular life. What do I mean by financial awareness? At least at a high level, understand where your assets are, everything you own and how much they're worth, what your liabilities are, who do you owe and how much, what is your income, what are all the sources of income, and what are your expenses. It would be good to have all of this information listed out somewhere where you have access to them and potentially maybe just really you have access to them. Now, this information will be much harder to get and probably more costly to get after a divorce, so get those things well beforehand. In fact, I'd suggest it just be part of regular looking after your financial wellness. Keep 3 years of tax returns for you and your spouse. Make a budget. Write out your priorities. It's important to know what's important to you in deciding how much money you might need. Close down any joint line of credits. Make sure you get your credit rating so you know what it is and can keep track of it. And again, keep all of these records in a place where you can easily access them. So financial awareness, very important, not just for people going through divorce, but for everybody to empower themselves to know where they are financially. Second, ask questions that are how questions, not why questions. When you ask somebody why you did something, it very often creates a defensive answer. When you ask somebody, how did you come to that decision? It really focuses on the process and doesn't create that same kind of defensive reaction. And of course, when you get a defensive reaction, you end up not talking about the thing that you're discussing, but rather getting in a debate about something else, which isn't productive. Thirdly, settle out of court. I know this sounds obvious, and most people know it, but surprisingly, an awful lot of people do end up going to court. The cost of court is very high. The other thing that people don't realize is it's extremely risky for both sides. No matter how good you think your case is, it's going to be decided by a judge who has a couple of hours to make a decision about your entire life, and it could go either way. So court is a very risky proposition. Of course, it's extremely costly, so any money you're fighting over may in fact go to the legal process anyway. One good alternative to going to court is mediation, because at the end of the day, after mediation, you do still have control over the money. The next one is pensions may be worth more than houses. Of course, matrimonial houses come with an awful lot of emotional baggage, and it's understandable, and all of those emotions are perfectly legitimate and okay. But an important thing to do when going through divorce is try to find other things to help drive your decisions, and one easy one is the numbers. Very often, when I run the numbers, it's much more valuable for a spouse to keep a pension than to keep the matrimonial home. When you do the long-term forecasting, it comes out to the advantage of one of the spouses to actually keep pensions instead of keeping the house. And that's sometimes hard to come to grips with, but when you look at the numbers and you see the long-term forecasting, it does take your mind a little bit away from the emotional and into the real nuts and bolts and numbers, which can help make a good decision. So it's not always the case that keeping the matrimonial home is the best thing for you or your family. Next is, speaking of emotions, don't let emotions rule your divorce. Sure, it's easier said than done. So it's not about not having emotions, because of course that's impossible. It's about being aware when you're being emotional and trying not to let those emotions guide your decisions. Don't let guilt rule you. In other words, don't give away too much in the hope that you're going to feel less guilty because of it, because in fact you may not. Don't be nice in the hope that you might get back. So don't give up more than you should in hope that if you do that, you might get back together. Leave revenge at the door. Legally, the legal system really doesn't pay any attention to why you're getting divorced. It just doesn't matter. Deal with those feelings with someone who's a professional who can deal with those emotions. Don't make threats. Don't succumb to threats. And focus on problem solving. The money you disagree on will probably be spent on the legal process. So do everything you can to solve problems and deal with it yourself. And finally, get a team. And a team, when it comes to divorce, in my professional opinion, consists of a good family lawyer, a specialist in divorce from a financial perspective, so someone with a certified divorce financial analyst designation, and a therapist or a listener who can give constructive advice over all the emotions that you're going to go through. And I'd suggest a team like that for people who have over $1 million in assets would want to make sure that you have all three parts of that team looked after.
Well, I'm just thinking of my Aunt Sadie. You said get somebody who's a therapist. My Aunt Sadie had a very good saying. She said, she lived to 104, and she always said, better two people should cry so four people can laugh. So when someone is going through a divorce, and it is painful and it is emotional, and you wouldn't be there hadn't you thought you were in love in the beginning. So I agree with you, and the advice is wonderful. It's interesting that we can make numbers talk, and that money can maybe sort things out without emotion, which might really alleviate some of the pain of a divorce, because you're not throwing arrows and darts. You're really talking about numbers, and I've learned that numbers don't lie.
Well, it takes away some of the stress when you actually look at options. It's hard to understand whether an option's better for you or worse for you, and it's quite stressful if you can't really figure that out. But when you have the long-term numbers staring you in the face, it becomes easier to make some of those decisions and causes less trouble.
So I didn't realize you were a certified divorce
financial
analyst. But if someone's sitting there maybe before Christmas and thinking that this might be a course of action they're going to take in January, will you speak to them about this particular problem?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
And are you going to work today?
I am going to work today.
Oh, so then we can just give people immediate gratification. If you're wondering if your money is working hard enough, or you're going through a stressful time and it involves a financial plan, to avail yourself of an expert opinion, and that can be Darren Farwell. The phone number is 416-863-7501. That's 416-863-7501. You can be proactive, you can get the information you need, and then you can take the action that you feel fits you best. And regardless of what it is, including divorce, Darren has the experience. He's been doing this since 1986. So Darren, thank you very much. I look forward to learning more as time goes on, and it's good to know that you are trained in many different aspects of financial planning, not just one. Have a great week, Darren.
Thank you, Marilyn.
So, next we're going to consider the gift of time with special world-class entertainment at Flato Markham Theatre. And then we're going to get eating tips for the holiday from Dr. Betty Rosendahl of the Thornhill Naturopathic Clinic. And lots more, all skewed to gift-giving from a woman's perspective right here on Zoomer Radio.